And so it is. Welcome to front-end error handling. Let's talk about how to fix errors, or let's talk about how to tell the user that they did something wrong, more like. Let's start with the screen share. So the general idea here is that you want to be able to intercept an error. A lot of times this comes from a network, and then display something to a user. So let's come up with an example. So if I make a index.html and app.js file, and I fill out HTML boilerplate and I bring in that JavaScript file. Say I have a form, so a likely source of errors. And in here, make a placeholder, make a submit button, and then over in the app.js file, we'll say form is document.querySelector form, and on submit, we prevent default. All right, cool. With just this, got this page. So I should be able to, cool, works. A couple things you can do for error handling on this. First one is built into HTML. Not nearly enough people take advantage of built-in form validations. For example, if I wanted to be able to make it so that you cannot submit this form without filling out this first input, make it required. If we do that, and I try to run this, oh, I get built-in error handling. It's pretty cool. We can also do it to constrain the data types that go in here. We can make those, well, so we can edit it and change it. We could make the type something like number. Let me do that. Yeah, so now those have to be numbers. If I try to type letters into them, won't go in at all. That's a good user experience. There's also some like crazy types of input types, like color. It'll give you a built-in color picker. And then the thing that input value will be equal to is the hex value of whatever color they pick. Pretty cool. So we have all kinds of cool things like that. But let's say we have a network request that fails. So I'm going to make a fetch to something that doesn't exist. Let's see. PS, and it'll be KylerCoberly.com. So that promise is always going to fail. And we can log the error and see. Cool. Cool. So if I try to do something in here, I'll go, oh, you got to fill out the field. All right. I make it fill out the field, and it errors out and says failed to fetch. However, unless your user has their fucking DevTools open, what they see is that. That sort of sucks. So we can improve on that. So I'm going to throw this in a repo. I want you to clone it down, and we'll work through some stuff together. Am I logged into GitHub in this browser? Yes. Cool. So I'll pull that down. We'll get remote, add origin, get push, origin master. And there she blows. All right, if you'll check in chat, go ahead and fork and clone this repo down and get it running on a server. I'll give you a minute to get that set up. All right, if you got this up and running, give me a thumbs up. C1, C2, C3, C4. Greg, you need help? Cool, thank you. All right, so give me some ideas. How can I let the user know that something went wrong?
Like alerts?
Sure, that's one way to do it. So I could alert error.message. And if I am serving up this app, All right, so I put something in here. All right, I get an alert, failed to fetch. So that's better than what we had before, but I'll ask you, if you were using a web app and they did this, would you think that was a modern, well-made web app? Or would you go, what is this shit? It's probably the latter. Also, failed to fetch. User doesn't know what fetch is. Fetch is a technical term. So how do we improve on alert? Alert was better than nothing. How do we make this better than alert?
Is it possible to write a custom alert?
Yeah, we could just write whatever we want in there. So we could say something like, instead of logging that message, I could say, so that's like a little bit less technical language. Now if I do that, oop, come on now.
I think you have it in the console log.
Oh, I put it in the console log, that's why. Okay, that's a little bit better, but still, something goes wrong on Gmail. I'm filling out a form online, it doesn't work out. It's pretty rare that I get a modal error. Because check it out, this alert, this freezes the page. You can't do anything else on this page while that's happening. That's called blocking. It's a common feature of modals. Modals are these little pop-up windows here. They change the mode of interaction on the application. So now you can only interact with that until you dismiss it or whatever. How do we do better than that? How do we beat the modal? Hint, the DOM.
Kyle, could you quickly explain the dot catch?
Yeah. Dot catch is awesome. So dot catch, dot then is what we do when we want to resolve a promise, right? So we'll take the response from that, maybe parse it, then maybe we do something with it, then we do something else, then we do something else, then we do something else. Cool. All of those assume that no errors happen. If an error happens anywhere in this promise chain, it goes, uh-oh, before I go on to the next dot then, before I even finish whatever dot then I'm in, let me see if there's a dot catch around here. And that'll intercept the error and let you handle it, do something with it. Another cool thing about dot catches is you can do them like, you can do them in pairs. So every dot then could have its own dot catch. You could have this dot catch will catch any error that happens in these first five promises. And then this dot catch will catch whichever one happens in that promise. But at a minimum, just always have a catch at the end of a promise chain. Always, always, always. In fact, your browser will yell at you if you're not doing it. They'll say, you got an unhandled error, uncaught error. This catches it. Also tells you what went wrong. Pretty cool. Okay, but if I want to display this to a user in something that doesn't pull up a modal, block the user interface, think about how does this happen when you're using a form online? How do those things tell you something went wrong?
It has like a little like P tag or something that just like displays a little message.
Yeah, something on the page that just shows a message. That's usually what we see. So, all right, a little p tag or something. When I put it in the form, I can say it's my error. So most of the time, I don't see anything. But maybe, just maybe, actually, let's just do that off of the form. If you didn't realize, you can call query selector on any element, not just the document. Cool. So instead of alerting this, what if I did error.textContent equals maybe something like that. All right. So I do something that's not going to work, and it shows up on the page, you know, like modern times. And then we could even do something like, we could style that error. Say anything that has an error class should be red. Okay, so I break the form. Hey, it looks like everything on the internet does. Pretty cool. Questions about how this works?
So if I had like multiple different errors that could be thrown.
Sure.
How do you do that?
We'll do that in a sec. Any questions about simple case, where you have one handler for anything that could go wrong? Cool. I want you to implement this now. So I'm going to hide my code. So give it a shot. I'm going to put, let's call this 4 minutes. 4 minutes, you get appropriate error handling showing up. Catch all, one error gets one message, kind of thing. Go. All right. Questions about how to do that, why we do that, why it works. Cool. So now let's talk about Lydia's question. We have multiple things that could go wrong. So maybe what we want to do, this catch here, this will catch if this network completely fails. All right, that's like easy enough. But if we make a successful request, it just generates a 500 response or something. That's not an error. So we need a different way to handle that. So let's say, I'm gonna make an API real quick. So if let's see, I'll do it in there. Rails API, Rails new API, broken backend. So I go over to the broken backend, and as some of you have been realizing, Rails new makes a repo for you. We already have a repo, so let's go ahead and get rid of the repo that they gave us. And we are going to Rails G controller bad, and let's see, apples. And then I'm going to go into that controller, go to the router, I'll say resources, Apple. And over here, let's say for my index, I just render status. We can put different statuses for all these. We can have something like unauthorized. We can have one that's like bad request. We could have one that's like okay. We can have one that's redirect. Actually, there's two different redirects. Let me see what Rails redirect status. Code. Let's see, Rails 301 status code. Moved permanently. There we go. And then for delete, maybe we'll say that the status is a 500 series. So let's see, Rails, it's a 500 status code. Internal server error. Cool, so we have this controller and each of its things gives us a different status code back. Bangarang. That means that if I do my fetch to localhost 3000 and I can just change the method and get different status codes back. So post, that should give me an okay. Everything else should give me 400s, 500s, all kinds of different stuff. And those probably won't catch our error. So if I do something like that, all right, that errored. Oh, it's because I'm not running the server, that's why. Oop. Let's see, kill all Puma. Oh, so this is doing it over there. All right, Rails SP 4000. I'll make that a 4000 instead. All right, so if I do something here, oops, still errored out. Let's take a look at it. Oh, it's because it needs to be the actual, or Apple's resource. All right, what didn't I like about that? Post to Apple's. Ooh, it gave a 200 back. That's interesting. Shout it out if you see it. Localhost 4000 Apples.
If you don't have any .thens, will it just like default to the catch? Oh, you do have a .then.
I do have a .then. I am parsing it, but it shouldn't be. Console.log. So if I go over here, why would that fail? All right, how do I debug this? You tell me.
Is it the course policy?
Is it what?
Is it the course policy?
Ah, it is the course policy. Good call. It's almost like that was exactly what the error was telling me. So let's turn on some cores. Good catch. And then all right. And now the stunning conclusion, still an error. Oop, came back 200 though. We like that. So now we got to figure out why did our 200 still fail? Okay, not throwing an error there. Ah, I see why. because I'm trying to parse the responses JSON. Why can't I do that?
Because there's no response, there's only a status.
Yeah, there's no response. In fact, if I take a look at that actual error message, I'll bet it'll tell me. So if I log that error, unexpected end of JSON input. Yeah, it's because there's no content in there. You can't make JSON out of nothing. Easy hack around that, which some of you figured out last week. There's other ways you can parse something. So if I just parse it as text, I'll bet it leaves me alone. Hey, there we go. No problem anymore. Okay, so now let's figure out how we're going to handle these different kinds of errors. Because if I change this to a get, for example, so I have get, that's going to hit the index. So that should give me a 401 response back. A 401 isn't a failed fetch. So even though we got that 401 there, it still got to the ahoy. It didn't throw an error at all. How do you think we're going to handle that?
Can you check if the response like has a status code in it?
Yeah, you can. So you might have been used to just doing something like this or something like that every time. You don't have to. That response object has all kinds of cool shit in it. So if instead, let's take a look at what's inside of that response. This is the first response that comes back from our fetch. This is before it's been parsed. Okay, so I do something here. All right, what do we have here? All kinds of cool shit. So it'll tell us the headers that we got back. It'll tell us whether or not the response was okay. Ooh, interesting. So a response is okay if its status code is less than 400. 100s are fine, 200s are fine, 300s are fine. Anywhere in that region, we call that an okay response. Anything that's 400 or above, we consider that a not okay response. That means something went wrong. So that'll help right there. We also get the exact status code, which is kind of nice. Also get access to the original URL that we requested. So if I said something like, all right, well, was the response okay? False. Hey, and it was. We got this 401 here. So that means we could do something like if not response okay, we could move, well, we copy that over here. We could say something like the request was unauthorized. It's still technical language, but we'll fix that in a sec. So I do this, and then, hey, now I have an error message. Check this shit out. So that's, if there's just any kind of generic error, I can do that. I can also take a look at that status code. So if I just look at the entire response there, status 401. So I could even do something like switch response.status, and then say case 401. And then something like that. All right. So now if I do that, all right, cool. Response was 401, and so I got that back. You could also put cases in for other stuff. So like one of our other errors is bad request. So that's a 400. So if the response code was 400, we could do something like that. And we get 400 responses from show. So if I do a get request to a specific ID, that should give me a 400 response. And so it did. So we can make these little mappings here of whatever we want these to be. We could even write those as a map, which would get rid of this stupid switch statement. I hate switch statements. So many places for bugs to hide in those. So if I have something like error messages, and then I can have 401. 401s is that. 400s is what's that? 13 to here. So now I can just have these in some kind of object, and instead of the switch, and look it up. I have something like if not response.ok, then error.textContent is error messages, and then we can just look up response.status. How cool is that? And now, when it's a 400, boom, response wasn't formed correctly. When I go back to the index, which is the 401, unauthorized, boom. So I can write custom error messages like that. Pretty cool. Ask me some questions. What's up, buddy? Gotcha.
Could you quickly go over like the switch case, this break syntax?
Absolutely. All right, hang on, I'm signing my kid into YouTube Kids. Okay, buddy, I think you're in there. That video didn't load up, but give that a shot. Okay, so the way that I was doing that before with the switch statement, so it's kind of like an if, but we're saying, all right, this response.status, this could be a lot of different things. If response.status is a 401, then do this. Otherwise, if it's a 400, then do this. Those breaks are important too, because if you don't put the break in there, it just keeps going. It's such a bad design. Like I said, switches are kind of error prone. You can also have defaults. So, all right, if none of the other cases matched, then do something generic like that. Most languages have switch statements. But if you have one thing that could be a lot of different values and you want to do different things based on which it is, you could go for a switch. Or any problem that can be solved with a switch can also be solved with this error messages thing I was doing. You do, all right, if, well, you could say, shoot, I don't want to do it that way. If not, response.ok. Then set the text content to look up whatever my error messages response.status is. That's a way more durable way to do that. And the coolest part about it, order doesn't matter on these. You put them whatever you want. Objects aren't ordered, so fixes a lot of problems. I gave an entire talk on that very idea. There's a recording of it and everything. So we go to kylecoberly.com and go to programming without ifs. I've got a video and I talk about in the slides how you can get rid of those switch statements and reduce your cyclomatic complexity. And that particular strategy is called dictionary lookup. So anytime you have this switch, days of the week, case is Monday, case is Tuesday, case is Wednesday. Anytime you're doing something like that, you can also do this. Make it an object and then just look it up based on the object. More questions?
So would you do this if statement before you parse JSON?
Yeah, exactly. So we can still parse stuff. We could say return response.json, or since we don't actually have any JSON here, just the text. And then that'll be available in the next step in the chain. Yeah, you can check headers. You can do all kinds of stuff in that step. You don't have to only do the parsing. You can make these error messages better. Want to write your error messages to be in the language of your users and like actually helpful to them. How happy are you when you get an error message that goes like, "Oh, you experienced a 1245A76 error." Cool, thanks, asshole. More questions? All right, so my challenge to you is see if you can handle errors in this first step here. You can try doing it as just a catch-all. If not, response.ok. It's a pretty good place to start. If you do have multiple errors, then fuck it. See if you can either do the switch statement, or even better, if you can do this dictionary lookup trick. And if you want to experiment around with that, I will delete this stuff. And that looks good. Cool. I'll push this up. And you can play around with that a little bit. Neat. Any last questions? Going once. Going twice. All right. Hope you learned something about front-end error handling. Bye.